just a minute here, give time for people to get in, and we will start right at 2 o'clock. So nice to see so many of you here. Feel free to make use. There's a discussion channel on the right-hand side of your Brazen screen. Feel free to make use of that. If you want to introduce yourself, add comments. I'm hoping that this workshop that we're about to start on designing your career and using life design is something that will be very interactive, even if we are on this digital medium. So feel free to get settled. We'll get started right at 2 o'clock. And in the meantime, if there are questions or ideas or comments, feel free to make use of the discussion board on the right. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? So thank you all for coming. I hope all of you are enjoying your time at Horizons by Hopkins, our conference today. I've been sitting in on a number of the panels and have found them to be incredibly exciting and useful, and definitely something that I wish that I had back when I was a doctoral student at Rutgers in the history department back in the decade of the 2000s. So this exercise, this workshop is called Design Your Career, using life design to find your true north. My name is Justin Lortz. I serve as the Director of Life Design for the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences here at Johns Hopkins in our Life Design Lab, which is something that at most schools would be a career center, but we are really emphasizing life design here at Hopkins. I want to start by just saying just how happy I am that so many of you have come out here today. Not just that you're here to hear me, but that you're really taking this opportunity to take the first step on your career journey. And I really designed this workshop for those of you who might have been at the conference today, have been hearing all of these wonderful presenters, but have found yourself feeling like you're a bit stuck, that you don't know the first step to take, that you want to figure out what your next step might be and how to explore careers, whether within or beyond the academy, but you don't know what step to take. And so I'm glad that you're here, because that's what I really want to focus on, is helping doctoral students, helping postdocs, helping recent PhDs get unstuck and make that first step in their career journey. So a brief introduction myself. Again, my name is Justin Lortz. I earned my PhD in history from Rutgers University, and I actually graduated. I defended my dissertation in September of 2008, which those of you probably can remember was not a very good time to be going on the academic job market. I defended about a week before Lehman Brothers went bankrupt and brought the entire global economy with it. So I know what it's like to be finishing up, to be job searching during a very difficult economic time and a very challenging academic job market. And so I was fortunate. I was able to transition and find a career at academic administration, working at NYU, going on working at Princeton, and then now working at Johns Hopkins in the Life Design Lab. That is my email address there. I'm also active on Twitter and have been tweeting along all day, and also have a blog, a website, educationdesign.com, where I post the activities that I do, both for workshops for PhD students, but also the classes that I teach that incorporate life design. So feel free to check those out. I have posted a version of this exercise that I'm doing today. So if you're someone who is looking at all the amazing options that are happening simultaneously in the 2 o'clock hour and weren't sure whether to do mine or another one, feel free to take off. You can check out what I'm putting on the website. We're also recording these things. But I do hope for those of you who stick around, I do think this will be a valuable opportunity to try out some exercises, some ways to really engage with yourself and the material to help you figure out how to take the next step and using life design to take the first step in your career journey. So the goals of the workshop today, I don't have a lot of time with you, but I want to try to get through quite a few things. One, I want to be able to introduce you to the basic processes and mindsets of design thinking and life design. The second is I want to help you begin to articulate what we in life design would call your compass towards your true north, but really to be able to articulate your values and what you want out of work and life, just an initial articulation of that. Three, I want to show you how thinking about and emphasizing with your daily activities, what you do every day can help you understand a bit more about yourself, but also give you some insights into your career. That what you, in order to understand possible steps forward, you don't have to go out and do an internship. You don't have to go out and explore an entirely new field. You can look at what you're doing now to better understand what you might be energized by, what you might be good at, what you might be interested in, and use that information to take a first step on your career journey. And finally, we're going to use a trick that designers use, creating a how might I statement. But we're going to use those to help you gather ideas, but to really define the problem that you're trying to solve, the questions that you want to ask. So those are the 4 goals of the workshop. I'm going to move quickly, but I'm going to also give us some time to pause, to reflect, to write some things down. So this is going to be an activity where I hope that you will, have a pen and pencil handy so that you could jot down some ideas and leave with some information about yourself. So here at Hopkins, my colleagues in the Futures office, the PDCO, and in the Life Design Lab believe that in order to find a career that you love, that you want to throw a lot of ideas about planning out the window. The idea that you can plan for a career 5, 10, 20 years from now. We really don't believe that. Most careers, if you talk to most people, most careers evolve almost seemingly haphazardly, but they never evolve according to plan. And so what we encourage students, whether they are first-year undergraduate students or whether they are students further along, PhDs, postdocs, we encourage people that in order to find a career you love, to think like a designer. So what does that mean to think like a designer? So we use the concepts of design thinking. And design thinking was basically a way of approaching problems, sort of a process for approaching problems that was developed out in Stanford University in Silicon Valley as a way to approach the problems of product design. So in fact, most of the consumer electronic devices in your on your desk and in your hands, your phones, were probably developed through this design thinking process. And you would go and you would empathize to understand what the user wants, how the user uses these uses these products, define the problem that you're trying to solve with the product that you're creating, generate ideas, hopefully lots of good ideas, wild ideas, outside of the box ideas, but as many ideas as you can. And then to very quickly prototype them, to try them out in quick, cheap, easy ways to see which ideas are worth pursuing. And then finally, you do all that before creating test products. And you could iterate this process over and over again, because the idea is that by the time you have a finished product, you've probably gone through this design thinking process multiple times, and that you are very confident in the product that you're bringing to market is good, is solid, and solves the problem that you're trying to solve. So design thinking is a process. It's also a set of mindsets, or even what we describe them as skills that we could actually teach students, that people can actually learn. So the 5 mindsets, the first one is radical collaboration, this idea that in order to get the questions, in order to get the right solutions, the right ideas, to generate wild, crazy ideas that you might not have thought of, you want to collaborate with people who are not like you. People who have different ideas, people with different mindsets, people who come from different backgrounds, people who are going to offer different ideas. So try to, your design team should involve as many different people as you can. The second part is what we're going to be doing a bit later on today, is this idea about reframing, taking problems that seem to get you, that force you to be stuck, that don't seem to have answers, and reframe them in a way so that you can begin generating ideas and answers moving forward. The third point is that curiosity. Designers love to ask questions. We encourage our students, the people I work with, when they're trying to figure out the next steps in their career and their life, talk to as many people as you can, ask as many questions as you can. Don't be focused on what you think is the right career, the right path forward. Just get out there and get as much information, as much ideas as you can, and really talk to people. Along the way, the fourth mindset is just be mindful of the process. Understand that life design and design thinking is a process that goes through many steps. Don't try to jump ahead and start, doing internships or start testing ideas before you have a sense of what you want to do. And be comfortable with the fact that, you're going through this process yourself. Don't try to rush it. And then finally, and this I think is a hard thing for PhD students and doctoral students and postdocs, is to have a bias towards action. Get out there and try stuff. Don't overthink things. Don't over-research things. The answer to your questions about career and about life are not on Google. They are out there in the world, and you need to get out there and try stuff. We like design thinking because it's a very good way to tackle wicked problems that don't have easy answers or answer that might have multiple answers or multiple answers that are competing with each other. So design thinking is a very good way to do that. And finally, why I like design thinking, especially working with doctoral students and postdocs, is that design thinking is a very good approach when you are stuck. And I think we need to face that a lot of us are stuck. And so that is something that actually two design professors out at Stanford University, Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, they work at the D Lab out at Stanford. They are both mechanical engineers and designers by trade, realized that our lives are the ultimate wicked problem. That from their conversations with students, that our approach to careers, our approach to career planning actually isn't working. It's not helping, that it's not actually true, this idea that you can plan a career. And that many of us, especially the students that they were talking to, really bright, motivated students out at Stanford University, but also many of their colleagues are stuck in their life. And so they realized that they could apply the design thinking principles to life and career. And so that is where we get life design. And so that is the techniques that we're going to use today. They added one additional piece to the design thinking process, and that is this first step, this step of accept, this idea that you are here. And I think this is really important for doctoral students because I think it's really easy, and I went through this myself, right? It's really easy to second guess your career decisions, to wish that you hadn't gone to graduate school at all, or maybe, I wish I would have gone to law school. I should have done something differently, or I should have, it's very easy to second guess yourself. But that is not actually helpful. What you want to do, and to begin this process, is just to accept that you are here, that you are finishing up a PhD in whatever, or have finished a PhD in whatever discipline, that you're looking for a new role, a job in a very challenging job market, that many of the jobs that you might have been pursuing before may no longer be there, or maybe they're in far fewer numbers. And so you need to accept that as a way to begin thinking about building your way forward. So that's the first step. And so I hope all of us through this process and going to the conference today have been able to take that step in accepting, have realized that there's a whole wonderful world out there of opportunity and fulfilling careers and satisfying lives that we can really embrace and be able to embrace the moment that we're in. One of the reasons that I think a lot of PhD students that I have spoken with are stuck and have a really hard time moving forward in their careers, especially if they're looking at careers beyond the academy, is that they're held back by what we at the Life Design Lab and Life Design and Design Thinking refer to as dysfunctional beliefs. These are beliefs that might be widely held. They might be ideas that you're hearing from your advisors, from colleagues, from parents. They might be ideas that people hold to be true or common wisdom, but in fact, they are untrue. They are ungenerative. They don't allow for new ideas and new possibilities. And finally, they're just frankly unhelpful. And so I think a lot of us are held back by these ideas. And so the first step that we want to do in this process is to take these ideas, accept them, understand what they are, and reframe them. Rephrase them, restate them, reframe them in a way where they are no longer holding us back, but they allow for new possibilities and new ideas. So what do I mean by this? Let's go through a few reframing exercises. So many of you might be feeling this, right? This idea that I should know where I'm going. When people ask you, what are you going to do? What's your next step in your career? It feels really awkward to say, I don't know, You're like, my gosh, I'm in my late 20s. I'm 30. By this age, I should know where I'm going. And that can be really limiting because oftentimes we don't know where we're going. Even mid-career, much further along in our career journey, we might not know exactly where we're going. So this idea that we need to always know where we're going, it can really hold us back. Instead, we can reframe that, right? We could say, I actually won't always know where I'm going, but I can know whether I'm going in the right direction, whether what I'm doing, the steps I'm taking now are leading me to a place where I am, I feel comfortable with my decisions, that I am actually pursuing something that aligns with my values and interests. And so we're going to, in our next exercise, learn how we can figure out whether or not we're going in the right direction. We saw this a lot. I don't know, those of you who might work with undergraduate students, either in a mentoring capacity, in a teaching capacity, there was a giant collective freakout, several months ago. And we were sort of barraged at the Life Design Lab from students just absolutely freaking out because their summer internships were canceled. And, we heard versions of what we see in the box here. My summer internship was canceled. My summer is ruined. I'm never going to move forward in their career. If we were in person, I would ask you how many of you either thought this yourselves or had students or people that you mentor come and ask this question. And so it's helpful to think about, what you would do or what did you do in the spring and summer if you were approached by undergraduate students with this fear? What would you say if you were approached now? Like, what would your reframe be? How would you reframe this idea? It's helpful to think about what that might actually, what you might say in this situation. If you can kind of put it in the discussion box, let me see if anyone's putting it up there. There we go. Yeah. So, being able to, if you want to reframe some ideas, think about how you might reframe this question. I begin with this idea on reframing this question, because I think a lot of us are very generous with our students, with those who we serve as mentors, with people who are behind us in the program. We're very generous. We're very good at helping them reframe their dysfunctional beliefs, helping them, talking them off the ledge, helping them find ways forward, talking them through and helping them be generative and productive. We are not nearly as good with being generous with ourselves and helping ourselves reframe our own dysfunctional beliefs. So let's think about as doctoral students or as PhDs or postdocs, what our dysfunctional beliefs might be. I want to throw out some that I've heard over the years, right? This idea that I'm too old to make a career pivot. I'm just going to ride this out. I'm too old to change. I'm 30, for God's sakes. I'm going to retire in 35 years. My PhD program didn't teach me any quote unquote useful skills. Maybe I should go to law school. I thought this myself. Maybe PhD in history is worthless. Maybe I should just either drop out or finish up and go to law school and get some really valuable skills. I don't have much control over where I end up. I would like to end up, I'd like to work closer to family or closer to, people who look like me or in the same city as my spouse. But, academics really have to go with the job where the jobs are. It's out of my hands. Or, I used to do this a lot when I was coaching doctoral students. They were really open to other career paths, but really, frightened about starting the process because they don't want to disappoint their advisor. So they were really worried about their advisor's perspective. And so they're open, but they don't want to disappoint their advisor. And so they were held back from taking the next step. And then finally, I think this is a big one that I think many of us can relate to. This idea that in order to be, as a PhD, in order to be successful, in order to be fulfilled, that you need to secure a tenure track faculty position. And very often it's even pitched as a tenure track faculty position, preferably at an R1 institution. The golden ring of academia. That is the only way in which you will be successful and fulfilled and have achieved the promise of your degree. That's not true, though, and we know that. And in fact, hopefully, one of the things that you've got out of today's conference is that there's actually many paths to professional success and fulfillment, and that what your goal is to figure out those that align with your values and interests. And so, if you can make that reframe, if you can reframe this idea that the only way to be successful and fulfilled is to be a faculty member, and reframe it and think about your career search as trying to find those paths and professional opportunities that align with your values and interests, not only you're going to be much more successful in the process, you're going to be more happier. It's going to be a much easier process for you if you take that reframe. To help you with this, what I want to do is start this first set of activities by finding what we call your true north. This idea about, how do I know that I'm going in the right direction? You've talked a lot about, I don't need to know where I'm going. I need to just know if I'm going in the right direction. Well, how do I know? And so what I want to start with is some ideas about helping you articulate why you work and what you see as your values and how your place in the world. And so we're going to build something that designers refer to as a compass to help you figure out what direction you need to go in. And so this is the empathize point, the empathize step in the life design process. Okay, so for this first part, and hopefully you have a pen and paper and can take some ideas to jot this down. What I want you to do is think about this question about what work means to you. Why work? What is this thing that we're getting degrees for something to enter into the world of work? What does work mean to you? And if you feel comfortable sharing the discussion box, please do. But think about some questions, like, why do we work in the first place? How does your work relate to others, your family, community, society at large? How important really is money? How about title or prestige? What defines good work? How important is it that I find fulfillment, whether that's intellectual fulfillment, spiritual fulfillment, whatever, through work? Or is it okay that I find that I find fulfillment in other aspects of my life? How important, and this is something that I think a lot of doctoral students struggle with, PhDs struggle with, how important is it that I utilize my academic and professional training? So take a couple minutes just to jot down some of these ideas, and if you feel comfortable, feel free to share your reactions in the discussion box. But I just want to give you a couple minutes just to jot down some of these ideas because they're going to be helpful for us moving forward. And again, if you feel comfortable jotting in the discussion box, please do. I know this is a little, having gotten so used to Zoom meetings and Zoom presentations over the last several months, I'm getting used to a discussion feed is a little bit different, but feel free to jot your ideas down there. We'll take about another minute. Just make sure that you just jot down some basic ideas about why you work. Okay. And now, if you want to wrap that up, now I want you to go even bigger, right? And to think about what we would call your worldview. And just to take a couple moments, and I know this is like sort of trying to wrap, your worldview into a 2-minute exercise done remotely during a conference is a bit challenging. But I think it's helpful just to take some time to think about, some of these questions. You don't have to come up with it comprehensively. And this in many ways can be aspirational too, sort of thinking about what you would like to value in the future, what you would like to see your role in relation to others. But, what are those things that are most valuable to you? It could be anything. Some people value wealth, respect, social justice, community, autonomy, whatever it is that you value, jot them down. What do you see as your purpose? Have you thought about that? Do you see that, whether it's your purpose on earth or what what motivates you in the morning, what you feel that your skill set and your abilities are best utilized for? How do you see your role in relation to others? Whether it's family, whether it's community, whether it's sort of society at large. Those of you who might be, religious, is there a role for a higher power, whether it's a God or a transcendence or something that's beyond the physical earth? And think about, if your life would have, answer the question, my life will have been meaningful and significant if. So just think about a few of these ideas. Just take a couple minutes. Yeah, there's an interesting comment in the box about, sort of sometimes answering these questions can make people anxious because you feel that, you're articulating a goal that you want to, that you should be doing this now. And I hope that this doesn't make you feel anxious. It's just sort of getting out some of these ideas. This is something that we're going to keep in mind as we explore careers. So don't feel, that if you're putting something down that I'm going to hold you to it, or even that you have to hold yourself to it. Some of these ideas can be aspirational. For many of us, we, especially in graduate school, realize that the process of being a graduate student, the process of going through this process takes us away from those things that once we thought matter or that still very much matter to us. So don't feel like it's going to, don't feel like I'm going to hold you to these ideas, but I think just do think that, it's good to write these down, because oftentimes when we go through our doctoral studies that we actually don't take the time to reflect on some of these broader things. All right, so hopefully you have some ideas, some basic ideas about why you work, what you want out of work, and where you see yourself in the broader world, what your values are, how you relate to others. And what we would hope is that there was coherence between these two ideas, that when you look them over, when you looked at your worldview, when you looked at your workview, that you would see that they complement. But maybe they don't. Maybe they clash. Maybe there's some disconnect there between what you're hoping for in work and the values that you hold or aspire to hold. Think about how well they integrate. Think about how well they inform or energize one another. Is there an opportunity to think about coherence, more deeply, to make them more coherent? We go through this process, right? So I begin with this because I think it's important for a couple of reasons. One is that very often we can go through our studies, through our training, without ever articulating what we want out of work or where we see the work that we do fitting into the broader picture. There's just this assumption that as we're going through, that we're going towards this goal, that this goal is good, that this goal aligns with our values. If it didn't, why would we apply to graduate school in the first place? And so we never actually take the time to articulate our beliefs. But taking the time to articulate your beliefs actually does one significant thing, is that it increases your ownership. This is now your ideas about work. This is now your worldview, your values, where you see things. So it gives you a chance to say, okay, this is actually what I believe, regardless of what I'm hearing from my advisor, my peers, my program, my parents, my colleagues, whatever. This is what I want out of work and what out of life. And then what we want is what you do to align with who you are and what you believe. That is what we would call a coherent life. A meaningful life is one in which who you are, what you do, and what you believe is a well-defined, well-designed, and coherent life. And so those two exercises that we just did, what you want out of work and where you see what your worldview, where you see yourself fitting into the bigger picture, can help guide you towards your true north. can help you figure out whether or not you're on the right path. If you're someone who believes in social justice and community and helping others and work-life balance, and you find yourself interviewing for jobs on Wall Street, there's a disconnect there. And you can use you can use this information to recognize that disconnect and maybe step back and say, is this a coherent life that I'm pursuing? Is this something that I really do want to pursue? All right, so you have this compass, and that's hopefully going to help you figure out whether or not you're going in the right direction. But how do you take the first step? I don't know about you. This is the hard thing for me when I was finishing up graduate school and sort of thinking about what my next step might be. When you talk to people who are out there, everyone's job sounds, you probably did this today. You heard from a bunch of people. It's like, oh, wow, that sounds really cool. Maybe I should do that. And that doctoral students, that PhDs, when they finish up and they go on to careers outside of the academy or within the academy, they go on to do amazing things. When I talk to my colleagues who graduated from Rutgers with me back in 2008, they're doing all sorts of amazing and interesting things, and they're incredibly successful. But they all had to take that first step. And I think we oftentimes stumble with that first step. Like, how do I know if being a consultant is something that I would be interested in? Or how do I know if working in government's a good next step for me? We could internship, but we could also start with information that we know. And so we do this activity in life design called energy and engagement gauges. And this is, again, a chance for us to empathize. And so I want to walk you through this activity a bit. So I'm gonna go through the steps of the activity, and I'm gonna give you about 5 minutes for you to do the activity yourself. And I think it'll be very helpful for you to do this part. And so what I want you to do, and you can make two separate lists, right? One can be a pre-COVID list, and one could be a list in the present, because for many of us, our lives are so different before and after, roughly March of 2020. And I want you to, in each of those lists, list 6 to 8 activities that comprised a significant part of your week. They could be professional, they could be academic, they could be co-curricular, extracurricular, volunteer work, just things that comprise a memorable or significant part of your week. What I would say for this activity is to avoid research, right? For many of us, if you're knee-deep in research comprises most of your waking time. So break that up, whether it's running experiments, analyzing data, lit review, conference presentations, working in the archives. Break up the research into its component parts as much as you can. For each activity, then, determine how much it engages you and how much it energizes you. By engagement, I mean, how much do these activities, do you lose yourself in these activities? Is this something that you could do, for several hours and it feels like only minutes have gone by? You're just really that into it. Or is it something where you're 2 minutes into it and you're already looking at your watch and figuring out, how much time left for this activity? And then for energizing you, when you're done, are you exhausted? Does this really just take the wind out of you? Or when you're done with the activity, do you feel energized and you want to do more, or you want to go on and do other things? Do you feel like at the end of end of a period of time doing this activity that you have more or less energy? And so, to use myself as an example, right? So I love teaching. I find it incredibly engaging. I really sort of lose myself in the moment. At the same time, I find it incredibly exhausting. So as much as I would love to imagine myself as being, say, a high school history teacher, the idea of teaching, for 6 hours a day just sounds exhausting. When I was in graduate school, I hated reading journal articles, right? I just, I would get onto the second paragraph and I was already being distracted and looking at my watch. It didn't necessarily knock me out, but it wasn't the most engaging activity by far. And then finally, and this is what I'm doing now during my COVID time, I'm spending a lot of time painting my house. I actually love painting my house. I find it incredibly engaging. I find it incredibly interesting. I find it incredibly energizing. It is one of my most favorite activities. So these are just some examples that you could throw out, right? And so then when you're done, place a star next to the most engaging or energizing activities and a minus sign next to the least engaging or energizing activities. right? So I want to give you a few minutes to try this activity out. And so I've put the instructions up on the board. So feel free to jot down your ideas on a sheet of paper. While you're doing this, I will play some music. And so just feel free to just take a couple minutes. We won't go the full 6 minutes of the song, but we'll just take a couple minutes to jot down some of your activities and think about how much they engage and energize you. Okay, so why don't we, if you have to wrap it up, feel free to wrap up what you're doing. And then take a look at your list and take a look at those activities that you have highlighted with a plus. These are the activities that are the most engaging or the most energizing of your week, whether that's the week in the present, where many of us are working from home and in a remote capacity, or whether that's the energizing activities from the week pre-COVID, where you might have been out and about and maybe kind of working directly with people. But take a look at those 2 to 3 activities that you've marked with a plus. And think about, try to pick one. Pick one activity that seems the most delightful, intriguing, worthy of further exploration. Maybe something that surprised you, something that you didn't, that you wrote down and then realized that doing this activity, maybe it's gardening, or like myself, painting my house. Circle that activity, because we're going to use that activity in the next step, right? In the next step of the process. So we've gone through this process, right? And so the reason why I like to do this especially if you are still in a degree program. So much of your life is spent kind of doing your research and your academic work that it's really hard to get out there and explore other career opportunities. You don't feel like you really know what's out there. And so by noticing which activities are engaging and energizing in your current life can help you think, increases your awareness, helps you understand which things that you're doing now you actually enjoy, and that you can actually use that understanding to begin designing your life. That you could actually take some of these ideas and start thinking about and asking questions about them to help you make career choices and think about what the next step in your career, your first step in the career process might be. So what do I mean by that? And so to help us with this, we're going to use this technique that designers use called a how might I statement. It's just sort of using questions, the question of creating this question of how might I in order to help define the problem in order to generate ideas. And so here's how this will work. And so the first step in this process is really defining your problem, right? Trying to get to the why. Don't worry. I think oftentimes when I myself go through this, when I'm talking to PhDs, you want to jump ahead to the how. How do I do this? How do I learn more about this? First, figure out why, what you're really trying to get at and answer. And in design thinking, we use an activity called the 5 whys, where we basically ask the question why 5 times to get deeper and deeper and deeper into the answer that hopefully helps you get to the heart of the matter. So you're going to ask yourself, why is this particular activity engaging or energizing for me? And keep asking why 5 times. So to show you an example of how the 5 whys work in practice. So I gave you the example. I enjoy painting my house. Love it. I find it energizing and engaging. And so why do I find painting my house energizing and engaging? Okay, well, I enjoy working with my hands. Okay, why? Although my research keeps me inside an archive or at a computer all day, I feel most alive when I'm working in a creative and physical manner. Interesting. Why? Well, as I think back on it, before I started graduate school, I spent my summers working as a painter in the Cal dorms, which is true. And I enjoyed seeing the fruits of my labor, which is also true. Well, why? Painting gives me a sense of accomplishment and gave me a sense of accomplishment that was very different than the traditional markers of success. And I enjoyed that and appreciated that. Well, why? Because when I was using my creative and physical abilities in collaboration with others to create something that directly benefited a community of people, right? So that kind of gets at the heart of the matter. That is actually, and even now when I'm painting my own house, I feel that is why I enjoy doing it. It's sort of a collaborative, creative, physical activity that is creating something that benefits other people. And so you could take that example that you drilled down into your why and turn that into a how might I statement. So how might I use my creative and physical abilities as part of a team to help build community? Now, what's cool about this process, so I started with painting my house, right? I am probably not going to go out and be a professional house painter. In fact, I will tell you right now, I'm not going to go out and be a professional house painter. That's something that, I tried that. That's not a career that I want to do, but I've taken this act of painting my house. And you can do the same thing with gardening. You can do the same thing with any number of activities that you enjoy. And you could keep asking why to get the heart of the problem. And so I've gone from painting my house to asking a question, how might I use my creative and physical abilities as part of a team to help build community? Right? So I'm no longer going to go out and say, well, how do I get a job painting houses? I'm now asking people, how might I use my creative and physical abilities as part of a team to help build community? And that question is going to give you a lot of interesting and useful answers, right? If you ask that question of people, you might get, and this is a question that I myself, and using me as an example, as I've thought about this, people have suggested, working in, academic administration, working in a residential college, which is actually what I did and a job that I really enjoyed. People have suggested working in, in a nonprofit. People have suggested working in areas where I would have a lot more creative flexibility and be able to write, but in a creative manner. So you're asking these questions that are going to give you a range of jobs and activities that I think are going to be out of the box, things that you might not have thought about yourself, but that are closer to getting at an activity that you really find energizing and engaging. Right? So the how might I statement is an incredibly valuable tool, and using those 5 whys is an incredibly valuable tool. So this is going to allow you to generate ideas that you might not have thought of. Right? And so this is going to be very helpful in your career exploration, in your career journey, because now you're not sort of feeling like you have to know, well, how do I become a consultant? I'm not really sure what a consultant does, but how do I learn more about that? You're asking about how you can maximize those activities that you already find energizing and engaging, how you can look for variations on things that you've already done, that you've already experienced, that you've enjoyed, and think about how that might play in a variety of different careers. So other examples, how might I use my skills as a writer and teacher to build a sense of community among fellow international students? How might I use my training as an educational historian to shape public understanding of poverty in order to impact public policy? Any number of how might I statements might give you a really interesting and useful question that you can then use to begin generating ideas to design your career. And so wrapping up this part, so all of you are researchers, and you know that in research, asking the right questions is often more important, or at least equally important to finding right answers. If you ask bad questions, you get bad answers. And so spend the time on your career journey really on this define piece, really asking what is it that you're trying to learn more about? What is it that you're trying to define? What is the question that you want answered? And using these design thinking techniques like the 5 whys to help you define the problem and ask the right question allows you to build forward in the right direction, right? So this combination of using the compass that you built so that your ideas are rooted in your values and your goals and ideas about work, and then taking these, using this process where you're defining a problem that really connects to things that energize you and engage you. Those two things combined will help you know that if you're moving in the right step, moving in the right direction. And so you have these how might I statements, and hopefully some of you have been following along, maybe jotting down some ideas. You're like, okay, Justin, now what? I have this really interesting question. How do I put it to use? And this is where the ideation phase comes in. This is where radical collaboration comes in. This is your chance to really generate some ideas that could be really interesting and different and out there, and things that you might not have thought of. So just a few ideas that you might take with you to try over the next couple weeks. Those of you who are meeting, who have a dissertation advisor, an advisor, or a PI that's really, open to your career exploration, and someone that's really open to someone that you can bounce ideas off of. If not, there's definitely most of, people, whether it's Roshni or myself or a career educator or something you go to for career advice, use this as a way to focus your meetings with those people. Rather than coming into a meeting and saying, well, what can I do? I'm finishing up a PhD in mechanical engineering. What kind of jobs are there out for me? Ask your how might I question. Use that as a way to focus the conversation to see what kind of ideas you generate. If you want to generate more ideas, and you should, right? Just getting ideas from your advisor or career counselor or someone that you go to for career advice is going to be a fairly narrow set of ideas. If you're back in a lab, or you have a digital wall in your lab or department, a discussion board, write down your how might I statement and invite others to share their ideas, right? And they can even be shared anonymously as people go by and just jot down ideas. And don't worry about whether it's, who's giving those ideas. You're going to get interesting ideas, whether it's from the chairman or chairwoman of the department, all the way down to an undergraduate student that might happen to see your piece, right? Just sort of get as many ideas as you can and share it with the department. Those of you who are following along on Twitter, right? Twitter's a great place to generate ideas, so post it to Twitter, use a hashtag to target a specific community, and invite people from that community to give you ideas. Right. And so you're going to use this how might I statement just to generate a range of ideas. Right. And these are the ideas that are going to give you possibilities for career steps that you can take. right? Don't worry if a lot of the ideas that you get are out there, or they're crazy, or they just sort of seem infeasible. You want as many ideas as you can, because you're going to be looking through these ideas, trying to figure out what seems interesting and what's a good next step to take. Because remember, for most of you, the career that you end up in is probably a career that you're not initially thinking about, right? It's a career that comes to you by happenstance, by accident, that you learn about it from a friend. So don't close off ideas at this stage in the process. And so I thank you all for joining me today. I hope this sort of gives you the tools that you have to take what I hope is the first step on an amazing career journey. If you need to contact me, I'm happy to continue the conversation. There is my email address here. You hit me up on Twitter, follow me on my website. But I do encourage you. You now have the really interesting how might I statement questions. Questions that you can ask as you break off into these different networking rooms, as you go back to your departments or your universities, or reconnect with other people in your field. Keep these statements as a way to generate different ideas. That the ideas that you're pursuing are not the ideas that you're necessarily going into the process having considered. So I thank you very much. And again, I will, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out over email. I'm happy to continue the conversation that way. So thank you all of you for coming out to the Horizons conference. I look forward to seeing all of you next year, hopefully in person, and enjoy the rest of the conference.